Hello guys and welcome to this overview on how to use this asset. Let's say you want to make a game where you can use the Unity navigation mesh, and in order to do that you need to use the X and Z axis. Firstly, we're gonna create a terrain object using a 3D quad, and we need to store all the objects in another parent empty object. We're gonna create a 2D object for the sprite and place it as the first child of the parent object. I'm now gonna assign it a random texture just to preview the positioning and rotation of this 2D object. And I'm positioning it to be in front of the 3D object so the texture is going to mask the 3D object. I'll set its rotation to make it face the top because we're making a terrain that's using the X and Z axis. Now we make it a prefab object and we can create our brush. To open the brush editor, click on Window, then Custom Tileset Brush Editor. We assign the prefab on the spawning object, we give a name to this brush, and we tell the brush which spreadsheet this object is going to use. I have here a basic spreadsheet made of 16 by 16 blocks of pixels. The pixels per unit field represents how many pixels of the spreadsheet are a single sprite. The three lock buttons are used to tell on which axis this object is going to be locked on. In our case, we're going to snap the object on -3i. We can now click the Create Brush button and we are now ready to use this brush. I'm gonna close the brush editor window and I'm going to open the tileset window. You can find it in Window, Custom Tileset. We need to create a parent object where all the terrain objects are going to be placed. This parent object is being used for important information, such as position of all children, that is being used to avoid placing two objects on the same position, or erasing the objects at the mouse position. We set its position to 0 and we are ready to start drawing. We go into the top orthographic view and we lock our view. Now we can hover around with the middle mouse button. The grid always stays at the last action made on screen, meaning I can move it around using the erase button, right clicking. You can place with the selected sprite using left click. Also, you can see that it won't create objects on top of each other. That's because our parent objects will not allow to place objects where there already exists children. We can move the selection of the sprite using WV, A, S, and D. We can also select the placing type as multiple random sprites, which will allow us to place our object that will use a random sprite from the ones you select. Pressing the pause placing toggle will pause controls and let you navigate in the scene view normally. You can change the grid size to a bigger number, but that will lag the computer because it's not programmed efficiently. Also, you can press E or Q to change the size of the placing block. These numbers are only powers of 2. Now we'll create a terrain that uses navigation mesh for our little game. We need to mark the terrain as static. I'm going to create another brush for 3D walls. Remember to put the sprite as the first child of the main object. After that, we press the plus button on the brush editor, we input a name, drag the prefab in, select a spreadsheet and use 16 pixels per unit. And we're ready to start drawing once we made the parent for the walls and set the camera on top view. As you can see here, they aren't positioning right. That's because our prefab object doesn't have relative position of children set to 0z and 0x. After I modified their values, I put them in the scene to make sure that everything is set right, and I make sure I apply these changes. Now, the Update All Children button updates all children of the current parent object to the current prefab object set on the current brush. I'm just drawing a little bit more walls and then I start filling this room with terrain. I make sure to set the parent object to the terrain object and select the terrain brush. Here, it took me a while to realize that the new terrain objects were not marked as static, so I changed the prefab to static and then I updated all children to the terrain parent object. And now everything was set for the navigation mesh. I set the camera to top orthographic view and add a little player controller in my scene for demonstration purposes. As well, an enemy to see if the navigation mesh is working correctly. I'm now gonna talk a little bit more about the Update All Children button and how it behaves. Let's say I wanted to make my walls look like this 3 cubic wall without a sprite. Firstly, I make this object a prefab, then I add it as the spawning object of the wall brush and I check the Disable Sprite toggle. As you can see, it is now modified and it doesn't have a sprite. Now, if I'd update it with an object that uses a sprite, it would be messed up with no sprite. I made a new brush that uses the wall with the sprite to show you that it always copies the sprite. Everything is good until you update it with something that has no sprite and it loses the texture data. Thank you guys for watching this video. This is everything you need to know about this tool. If you have any problems with the asset, make sure you contact me and I'll fix it as soon as I can.